What does it take to become a professional comic, manga, or webtoon artist? Do you need to dedicate your life to practicing art and writing? Do you need to invest in expensive drawing tablets or fancy ink pens? Or do you need to sell your soul to the devil? Today, we will be sitting down with horror manga artist Gigi Murakami to discuss how she became a pro horror mangaka with VIZ Media. For those of you that don't know, VIZ Media is the #1 destination for manga in America and home to some of the most prestigious anime brands driving the industry. In recent years, VIZ has introduced the VIZ Originals program and the VIZ One-Shot program, allowing mangaka from all over the world to make their professional debut alongside editor-in-chief Sasaki Hisashi, the former head of Weekly Shonen Jump. You may recognize the name Gigi Murakami if you have read the horror one-shot Resenter, now available on VIZ's official website and mobile app. I am determined to know how this New York-based artist got published in VIZ's one-shot program, went viral on social media, and crafted a horror manga unlike anything I have ever seen before.
Hi, my name is Gigi Murakami. I'm a horror manga artist and illustrator, and I make a supernatural horror manga called Resenter that was recently published in VIZ. Yeah, I'm all over online just at Gigi Murakami. I also have an online store at gigimurakami.store and my website, gigimurakami.art.
As mentioned before, Gigi Murakami specializes in horror manga. The Westport Library defines horror as a genre of literature, film, and television that is meant to scare, startle, shock, or repulse audiences. The key focus of horror is to elicit a sense of dread in the reader through frightening images, themes, and situations. Influential horror manga include Uzumaki, The Summer Hikaru Died, and Panorama of Hell.
I think that horror is a good chance to be introspective. I think that it's a good time to be experimental, to be a reflection for like the world's anxieties, you know, the troubles of like other people or what's happening in the zeitgeist, and kind of be a reflection of that, or to kind of like question that in a very interesting way. So yeah, for me, horror is always like a tool to like either get information, ask a question, or like show people something ugly about themselves.
When I think of horror, I often think about scary monsters, eerie lighting, and loud noises. As a horror author yourself, would you say there is more to horror than just gore and jump scares?
There's definitely more to horror than just like jump scares and like blood and gore. Like I was saying, like there is like that introspective bit of horror where you can question the world around you, you can question yourself, you can like question culture and society. There's so much going on there. And obviously like bringing up absurdist humor, like we can find like the silliness and like very horrific things. For superhero stuff, like a lot of people like to make fun of like Batman, like he's just like an emotional man in a mask. But if you think about a slasher, it's the same thing. It's a little scarier because like this guy's got a knife or whatever, but like, you know, it is like just a dude running around in a mask. So it's like, this is kind of silly, like what are we really doing? Though on the more absurdist side, getting a little into like Hideshi Hino's work, he has a lot of like jokes about like madness. Not jokes, specific jokes, but he does play around with the humor of like madness. And that's something found in Junji Ito's work also. But it's just like, it's cartoonishly silly and like absurd how like mad these characters are. Like in Panorama of Hell, there's this one character, I think his name is the Painter, and he's just like, he uses his own blood to make these paintings. And he's like, oh, it's beautiful blood. Oh, and he's like cutting himself up. And it's like, what are you doing? This is so silly. Like, what do you mean? There's gore in that, but like, there is more to horror than just that.
Horror and humor are two sides of the same coin. When you take a moment to think about it, a jump scare is the equivalent of a punchline. Take for example the horror one-shot Hanging Balloons by Junji Ito. In that story, giant balloons with human faces appear all over Japan. The balloons are searching for the owners of their faces to tie a noose around their neck and kill them. In one scene, the main character's father leaves home and ventures out because his job did not give him the day off. He is instantly killed by the balloon that bears his face. While this scene is grotesque, it is also a very silly commentary on Japanese work culture. Horror and humor are opposites in the sense that we cannot fully experience both at the same time. However, they complement each other, so it's important to acknowledge their relationship. When writing horror, there are different ways to come up with a quote-unquote scary idea. Some authors begin brainstorming by coming up with a monster or a subject first. Other authors use real-world events or history as a basis for social commentary. Some authors choose to use their own lived experiences, fears and anxieties, or trauma.
A lot of my process for writing horror is, it's very personal. Either it's something that like I have a personal anxiety with and I'm praying that other people feel this way too, or it's just like a question that I'm kind of thinking about, that I'm mulling around with. Like I said, the one-shot Wash and Go was very personal to me. It was like a personal anxiety. Resenter, on the other hand, the crux of the story, the idea of revenge, is one that is personal to me. The idea of like, well, what happens when you are in this world where like you can just endlessly get revenge? That is just like a question that was stemming from this, like these personal experiences that I had. My life is not that horrific for me to just like constantly pull things from my experience. And some of the things that I can pull, that I could spin into something horrific, I typically leave that stuff for my illustrations. I think when it comes to writing horror, you can do really well if you go very big and you think very intentionally about like world events, what's happening in culture, what's happening in the zeitgeist, or if you go very small and you stick to like your own personal anxieties or fears and try to like dive deeper into that. I think those are two very good wells that you can kind of pull from for writing horror. There is this very short one shot that I did, I think maybe 2 years ago now, 1 or 2 years ago, called Wash and Go. It's a short one shot about a woman going to the hairdresser and not having a fun time at the hairdresser. And that's something that is based on my own personal like anxieties. I grew up like getting my hair like, relaxed and stuff like that, and like having a lot of like chemical treatments in my hair. And so when I got to college, I cut off my hair and just went natural, and I've been natural ever since. And a lot of the times I will do my own hair by myself. Like a lot of Black women don't do that. It's too much work. A lot of times, like a lot of us will just go to the beauty salon and, you know, get wash and goes where they just wash your hair, put some rollers in and like blow dry it out, and it'll be like nice and cute. And that's cute and all, but I don't like being in a room full of strangers and I have to sit with my eyes closed for 40 minutes. That makes me very uncomfortable. I don't know where my bag is at. I don't know like where my phone is. It's a rare concept. And then sometimes you have like other people like helping the main hairdresser with your hair. And it's like, I'm feeling 2 sets of hands and now I'm feeling 4 sets of hands. Like, what the fuck? Like, what's going on? Like, who's back here? I don't know who's coming in and out of the establishment. Like, it just makes me very anxious that I have to be sitting in a space publicly with my eyes. Like, imagine taking a nap in the middle of like a public place, you know, like you're walking in a park, you sit down on a bench and you just close your eye. You would never do that. Not in New York City. You're not doing that. So that kind of freaks me out. So I made like a small horror one shot, posted it for free for a limited time on Twitter, and it went viral. It went viral like twice. Yeah.
I know what you might be thinking. How can a comic book be scary? With film, you can use dramatic lighting to create uneasiness and blindness. You can use music and sound effects to build suspense to make you jump. You can use video editing to create distortion or confusion. But what can you really do in a graphic novel when it's just paper? Let me introduce you to the concept called the page flip. You can replicate a jump scare by building up suspense and placing a shocking image on the page underneath. When your reader turns the page, they will be forced to walk right into the trap you set.
I try to achieve that through pacing and taking advantage of like silence versus like onomatopoeia. I try to use a lot of like film techniques, honestly, when it comes to creating manga. I really like Ari Aster's work. I think Hereditary is probably one of my favorite horror movies ever. I love Jordan Peele. Get Out was a game changer. There are a ton of like non-horror directors that I really enjoy, that I try to keep in the back of my head as I'm working on like paneling and like, I guess, setting a scene in a story. Christopher Nolan is a big one. Quentin Tarantino is like, not so much for manga, but more so for like my overall like artistic voice and like my aesthetics that I really enjoy. Katsuhiro Otomo, who is one of like my heavy hitter influences also. Tatsuki Fujimoto also does that. We all know that like he's a movie guy also. One of the things that I try to be really cognizant of is Hayao Miyazaki mentioned this concept of ma for his movies, which is like after a period of like turmoil or like a big reveal to the audience, or where there's just been like a scene of like a lot of action, there's typically like a slow down period, like a cool down, and it gets a little more atmospheric. It's intentionally very quiet. And it's meant to be a time for the audience to like reflect on what they've saw, reflect on the story, just like a breathing space. But yeah, Even if it means like stretching out your page count, being cognizant of like setting the scene and being aware of like the world and like showing the world and like showing bit by bit what's happening to build suspense. Even if you're not showing the actual character or like the action itself happening, but like showing the world around the action, if that makes sense. Finding obscure ways to like show what's going on outside of like directly doing like the obvious thing of showing what's going on.
If you are a webtoon creator, you can also take advantage of the website's ability to let you include GIFs and audio files into your episodes. In the webtoon, The Bang Qian Dong Ghost, these features are used to create a chilling experience. Speaking of comics, I do want to talk about your horror manga one-shot Resenter that was recently published by VIZ Media.
Yeah, so Resenter is ultimately a story about revenge. It is a story about morality. It is a story about power, and it's a story about choice. Resenter is about a girl named Jackie who is murdered at her job one night, and she wakes up in this place called the Death Zone, and she meets a woman named Rhea, who is a Ripper, and Rippers are like the Grim Reapers in this world. And she offers Jackie 3 options for passing over into the afterlife. The first option is to basically just pass over. The second option would be for Rhea to get revenge on Jackie's behalf and kill her killer. And that's the primary function of Rippers in this world. And the third option is for Jackie to actually become a Ripper. So when starting Resenter, I actually drew Jackie first. I had seen some promotional artwork for an old Japanese revenge tale. It's called Scorpion Prisoner Number 70 something. I never remember the prisoner name. Funny enough, the main actress, her name is Meiko Kaji, and Kill Bill is based off of one of her old movies. So very like similar ties happening. Like Jackie's aesthetics and like her outfit is coming from the main character in Sasori. And I just kept playing with this like design of Jackie, and I started going into like, well, Grim Reapers and like thinking about like Bleach and like wanting to create something that was similar to like Bleach and Death Note, and like how do I get this thing together and like have like a story that has a combination of like all of these things that I'm interested in, and revenge and like resentment just kind of like came up because that was just top of mind. And in the one shot, she is kind of dealing with the Ripper world and like dealing with this job as a Ripper and experiencing things for the first time that she is not quite ready for. She could not have anticipated. If you read the one shot that's on Viz and you read the first chapter, you have a stronger understanding of like the duality of this world and how revenge can be this very empowering, cathartic thing that like you can do and you can feel good about, but then it can also be this thing that is questionable, and it's like it's not so good.
Aside from the interesting premise, the gritty artwork, and the mysterious world, one of my favorite aspects about Resenter is the morally gray writing. It's a tough read watching Jackie come to terms with what she must do.
I can talk a little bit about that. Actually, I would be thrilled to like continue that up because a lot of people have had questions about like, well, what if she doesn't do it? I met up with Jake Adelstein, who is the writer of Tokyo Vice. So the Tokyo Vice TV show on HBO, like that's his story. He read the one shot and he invited me out to breakfast and was like, oh my God, this story is so good. And he was like, you know, I kept thinking like, what would happen like if she didn't do it? And it's like, but Jake, she has to do it. Like that is the rules of the world. And so like my husband Shinji was like, this is a lot. Like this can't happen. Like you can't have her do this. And I had to explain to him also, like, this is writing 101. Like once you make the rules, like you have to follow the rules. And Sasaki was also like, yeah, we have to, but like how do we do it? It is meant to make people think twice. I know that there were some people that read it that felt like the ending was too soft. Some people wanted a more brutal ending, which initially I was gonna go with. It was suggested that I pull it back a little bit. And I am kind of glad that I did because it holds the theme more true. I love a good revenge story. I love revenge movies. I think that they are very cathartic and like they're needed, and like small, healthy acts of revenge are fine. But there are times when like that thinking can get out of control. And I think we have to always be thinking about both sides of things, right? We should have a wider, broader perspective of the things that we enjoy or the things that we want catharsis from. I think revenge is something that we don't think so much about. critically, because it's just like, yeah, get that bitch, blah, 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 blah. And unfortunately, I feel like that is something that throughout human history has kind of like bitten us in the ass. While revenge can be cathartic and it can make us feel good in the moment, it can also just be a dopamine hit. And we should also be thinking more critically about like whether or not this is simply just self-serving, if it's actually providing a purpose, if our personal catharsis is worth it, and how this could potentially affect other people. I think everybody has dealt with like feelings of revenge or resentment with people in their lives, with jobs, you know, all types of experiences. And I think Resenter is a good way to get people to question their own feelings. That's part of the reason why Resenter was created, because I was going through those feelings in my own personal life, and I just needed a way to explore that was like productive. I think that is, you know, something that I'd like readers of Resenter to be thinking about. Just, I want my readers to be more well-rounded, well-thought people who are thinking about philosophy, thinking about morality, thinking about revenge, and like thinking about how these things are not so black and white and they're quite complicated. And just because you feel good in the moment does not mean that it is an overall net positive.
I do have one really big complaint about your manga though, because I did feel robbed. I can care less about the human world. I see that every day. I was more curious about the Ripper world.
Well, I'm sorry you felt robbed. No, so to be honest, I am still thinking about how I want the Ripper world to operate. For the one shot though, it did make sense to focus more on the living world, just for like, because of the nature of the one shots and like page constraints and stuff like that. Aesthetically, I know what the Ripper world is going to look like. There are also like, because it's a supernatural space, there's also other things that could be done in the Ripper world, or like other places that Rippers and other supernatural entities can like exist in. But as far as the rules of the Ripper world, there are a few things that are like, I have grounded. Like a good way of like being able to tell the distinction of like the Ripper world from the living world is that there's cobblestone, and a lot of the like visuals for the Ripper world were inspired by Hong Kong, and of like dystopian like stuff like Blade Runner and like Blam. That's kind of like aesthetically like where I wanted the Ripper world to go. Thinking back even to Dorohedoro, it's kind of like looks like that also. And I don't know, like if Resenter is serialized with Viz, I don't know if these ideas will stick. But I was having this idea of like a stock market of Rippers, where like based on how many souls people get for like the month or something, like would determine certain benefits that they get, or you know, something like that. Like it would be like a target to like look for, like I'm gonna try to beat this person's. That's probably the only like monitor exclusive I can give you, because I haven't talked about that anywhere.
Well, I have my fingers crossed for you. I personally really enjoyed reading it, if that means anything. I'm very excited to see some form of continuation in the future. And speaking of the future, can you please tell us any future plans you have coming up that we should keep an eye on?
I do have a book coming out in January that I worked with Abrams Books on. It's through the Are You Afraid of the Dark IP? And it's a horror anthology called Sinister Sisters. So that will be dropping in January next year, but pre-orders are out now. They have digital downloads for that, digital pre-orders and paperback copies and hard copies. So yeah, you can check that out. I'm working on a Kickstarter. It's not mine, somebody else's Kickstarter, but another horror anthology that I'm currently working on now. I'm on deadline for that also for January. So a few things coming in the pipeline. So again, my name is Gigi Murakami, horror manga artist and illustrator. Also Ignatz nominated. I have to remember to put that in there. But yeah, you can support my work by reading Resenter on Viz. You can also read the first chapter of Resenter on my website, gigimurakami.store. Check out my website, gigimurakami.art. Also, I am on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, I'm on TikTok. Instagram is Gigi_Murakami, and Gigi Murakami literally on everything else.
Finally, what is one piece of advice you would like to share with your fans who are listening who might want to become a manga artist like you one day?
I would say be patient. It's very easy to see somebody in my position or somebody like even in Monitor's position or like a white manga's position, Nicholas Draper Ivy's position, and be like, I want to do that. Why am I not there? It's very easy to kind of fall into that like thinking, but this takes a lot of hard work and it takes a lot of time. And it also takes an amount of luck as well. I think that that is something that people should be very, very, very much aware of and not think so much about like what other people are doing. It's fine to like look at other people's careers and be like, dang, I want to do that too. There needs to be like an intentional check-in of like, am I focusing too much on somebody else's stuff? Because if you're focusing too much on somebody else's stuff, then you're not focusing on your own stuff. And personally, like I get it. I have been in that position where I'm looking at like my friends' careers or I'm looking at other people's careers and like feeling like upset about like me being stagnant or not being where I want to be. Very much like that was me like before the pandemic for sure. But the moment you start focusing on you and your own stuff and stop thinking about what other people are doing and just think about what you want your career to be like, what is your goal? What do you want to do? What are future collabs you'd like to do? Where would you like to be published? Your entire world is based on you and your stuff. That's when things start truly moving. Be patient. I hate to use this word because it's so overused, but like, don't be a hater. Be patient. There's room for everybody to have their stories read. There's enough people out here to read everybody's stories and for everybody to receive some level of success for their work. But like, you gotta be patient and you gotta focus on you, you know, and take care of your people. Good luck and like karma. These things are all kind of like wrapped up in like the service that you provide to other people too. So build community, be patient, be kind to people and celebrate other people's success because you'll have more people celebrating your success when it happens.
Thank you so much for your time today, Gigi.
Thank you so much for coming through and watching the video, and big shout out to Monitor Comics for having me on here. I appreciate it. Y'all, it is still October, still spooky season, so please go read Resenter. Thank you so much for watching. Like the video, send it to your friends, and subscribe to Monitor and to